I will share my screen. So tonight we're talking about fun. So I thought I'd kick it off by showing you a couple of videos from some students who've gotten really creative with how to do fun online with their friends. So this is Destiny, and Destiny does K-pop. I just realized I need to share my audio for this to work well. Let's see. There it is. Here we go. All right, so this is Destiny. She does K-pop. So she leads an online K-pop dance class with her friends. And then they have some honest conversation and other pieces of the event later. And I'll tell you the details of how to make these events in a second. But K-pop, and then the furthest thing I can think of from K-pop is this. So this is Olivia, and she does horse soccer. Let's see if it'll work. There we go.
Today, soccer. Kosi champion. He's an offensive player. Usually put him as striker. Look at this. They're missing it, horse. They're missing it! Okay. I'll give him a little pass. That's the goal.
So the horse is actually dribbling this ball down the field, and if you can see right back there, there are two cones that they have as a goal. And so this is Olivia. She takes videos of herself playing horse soccer, and then she has this amazing event with other equestrian majors. So she is an equestrian major in California, and they have classes like mule packing. So they're an interesting bunch of folks, but they love this and they have a great time doing it together. So tonight, what we're going to talk about is how do we bring fun together with God's mission. So one of the things I love about this is God has made you uniquely, your interests, your stories, and He has placed you in a community. And those are the folks that are going to respond both to your interests and to your story. God has wired you this way. And so we put together something called Ignite, which is just our name for our tool, which helps take the things that you're already good at, the things that you already love to do, and bring it together with your stories of God working in your life today and help you offer that to your friends. So it has 3 steps. The first is Spark. I'm going to just kind of run through this a little bit, and then what we're going to do is slow it way down, and I'll show you an example of an event, and we'll try it on for size. So if this feels like it goes fast, totally fine. You can always go back and look at it later. So the first step is Spark, and Spark is the fun. So this is you coming up with your fun event. So we're going to follow Destiny's story. So Destiny's 20 years old. She practices K-pop in her free time, and she invites others to come and dance with her and afterward have an honest conversation about race, justice, and Jesus. She also asked her friend Seth to co-lead this event with her. So why don't we just in the chat, what's a fun event that you would, or a fun hobby that you could share with other people? And may not be K-pop, that's totally fine. We've had people do cooking classes where they're hosting a cooking class online. We even had somebody host a Russian lit reading group. The things that you love, your friends love, those are the things that work well. Let's see what kinds of fun things.
Need a chat number there, please, Jamie. Thank you.
Let's see. It should be. Well, and Bill, you can just tell us. You don't have to. You don't have to try and type.
No, that's fine. All I need is just the thing here.
Oh, I didn't put a link to a Google Doc. We're just putting them in the chat feature.
Oh, in the regular chat.
Mm-hmm. So Kim says crocheting. That was exactly what I was going to say. And craft, says Amanda. That's fantastic. Bill, what do you like to do? You can just talk.
I like to run.
You like
Um,
to run? That's
but
fantastic.
it would probably be easier just to play Uno.
Probably, although we did have a student who also loved running, loves hiking, just being outdoors in general. And what he ended up doing was everyone would take a hike in their neighborhood, take some pictures along the way, and then they would jump on Zoom afterwards and give like little tours of the hikes that they just took or the runs they took. So
Yep.
you can be really creative. Hey, welcome, Jeremiah. Ryan
Hi.
or Jeremiah, do you have hobbies that you would share with other folks?
I'll just
Nice.
lots to type and explain.
Tabletop board games, I love it. Video games, sled hockey, and wheelchair basketball. That's fantastic.
Yep.
I also like playing video games and watching TV. I don't know if that's a hobby. Binge watching TV.
Hey,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways to have watch parties now. That could work really well. I think should be in your mom's room. Sorry, we're having a bedtime crisis. Our stuffed animal isn't immediately available. Awesome. So you guys already have your awesome hobbies. Let me share my screen again. There we go. There's your hobbies. The next thing Destiny did was get really creative about how she invited. So she invited friends, like people that she could just text. That was really easy and obvious. But then she got really creative by realizing she had 2 other layers of people in her life. So she had people like in her class that like everyone was in group me's and things because everything's online, ways that she could contact people, and she could just drop an invitation into the group me. And that would be fine. It's like a little bit of an announcement. So there's those folks. And then there's like the people on Instagram, the people that follow her on TikTok, all that sort of thing. And she actually put an invitation at all 3 levels. And she saw folks coming out to K-pop from all 3 levels. So people she never thought to invite from her econ class or just an online acquaintance would show up because she was brave enough to put her invitation out. And we're not going to go into that tonight. We're not going to learn how to do that tonight. But at the end, I'll show you the website where all of this is housed. And it has kind of a detail, step-by-step. How do you make a really great invitation that you can put online or text to friends? So here's the second step of Ignite, and we call it Flame. This is the honest conversation part. And a little bit later tonight, this is where we'll drill in. So this is where fun moves from being just something that's great to do together to being meaningful. Because part of what fun does is it connects us. It helps us to be open to one another. And then hosting an honest conversation helps that connection really fan into flame, and God can actually turn a small little conversation into a whole lot. So let's tell you Destiny's story. So Destiny wanted her friends to hear a personal story of hope that would grow their curiosity and openness toward Jesus. She wondered what she should share, and she remembered that Jesus can turn our mess into a message of hope. So Destiny brought her own brokenness to Jesus in listening prayer. She asked Jesus to speak to her about her numbness. So she did a couple of really important things. So one is she is choosing to tell a story that's happening right now, not just a story of how she decided to follow Jesus or how she was raised in the church. And what that does with our friends is it makes Jesus much more relevant, because if Jesus is relevant to you right now, he might be relevant to me right now. And the second thing she did that's really good is she identified what's the place where she needs Jesus's help. So that's here at the end. She asked Jesus to speak about her numbness. She identified the brokenness she was experiencing and invited Jesus in so she would have a fresh word of hope to offer her friends. So we're just going to take a moment and do a little bit of listening prayer right now. So I threw down a few emotions that are probably something that we've all experienced sometime in the last semester. It could be anxiety or loneliness, numbness, depression, or anger, or another emotion that you're suffering with. So why don't we just, in the chat, what's the emotion that you've been experiencing in the last week or two? And then we'll take a moment to pray and ask Jesus to give us a fresh word. We have anxiety, fear, loneliness, anger. And if you don't want to post for everyone to see, that's fine. I'll just give us another moment or so. Fear and anxiety. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And it's easy to have these emotions kind of just underneath the surface. So let's just take it to Jesus and see if he'll give us just a fresh word of hope. So Jesus, would you come and speak to us about our anxieties and our fears, our loneliness and our anger? Lord, give us a fresh word of hope. Jesus, thank you that you meet us in our brokenness. You want to give us your presence. You want to give us your goodness. Jesus, thank you that we can take our stories, even if we're right in the middle of them, and offer them to others. And they can see your hope, even in the midst of our process. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. We'll come back and process that a little bit more. So when we actually look at a filled out event, I'm going to give us a chance to write our story. So begin writing some of the things we might have heard in prayer or some of the ways that we feel broken. And we'll just sort of pretend, if you are going to host this event, what might you say during the honest conversation part of the event? All right. So then, this is Destiny's prayer. So she prayed and asked for God to come and speak to her. And then this is her story. So she says, I've been feeling a mix of feeling numb and feeling overwhelmed by all the strong emotions stirred up by the racial injustice. I got to a point where nothing was helping me. So I went to Jesus in prayer. Jesus gave me a sense of peace and hope that things would get better. He also led me to reach out to some friends for support in processing my emotions. So it's just a very simple story, right? And it's not It's not preachy, and it's not even all the way processed. But just by being honest about where she's at and how Jesus is meeting her is exactly what her friends need to move from being sort of indifferent about Destiny's faith to being curious or even open to Jesus themselves. And part of what you'll get good at as you learn this event, or as you learn how to do great online witness, is give just short little snippets of your story, just little windows of how you're feeling and how God is meeting you. And that's a little offering that your friends need, little encouragement that your friends need to begin their own spiritual journey. All right. And then the last step is fire. So this is the very end of the event, and where you actually invite your friends to consider joining you in InterVarsity. So up to this point, you've had a ton of fun together dancing K-pop. You've had a really honest conversation about how you're doing in the midst of this semester. And now you're tying it all together and basically saying, if you're interested in anything that I shared earlier, I have a group that I'm a part of where we have honest conversations and look at Jesus. And so that's what Destiny did. She said, I'm hosting a group of students to look more deeply at this piece of art. She had shown a piece of art and the Jesus quote that inspired it. If you consider yourself spiritually curious or open, I would love to hear your perspective. Are you interested in free on the day and time? And invited them into her Bible study. And ultimately, Destiny and Seth led a great Ignite with students from all over the country. They danced together online, they shared vulnerably about their emotions, and one person even committed their life to following Jesus. Everyone gained a sense of community around justice and saw hope and faith growing in their hearts. And that's the goal of Ignite. And so now it's your turn. All right. Let's see here. Let's just stop there for a second and process. What do you like about putting together fun and your honest stories about how Jesus is meeting you? Or what questions do you have at this point?
I like how easy this feels. Like, people like to have fun and they want to do it together. And it feels easy to share my own story and how Jesus is meeting me.
Yeah. If you remember way back to the very first time we met together, we looked at the different myths of evangelism. And one of the myths is that we have to tell absolutely everything we know about Jesus. And this is a great example of, I can just share little pieces while we're having fun. And that actually moves people's hearts a ton, because we aren't just trying to download absolutely everything. We're just giving them little snippets. So I love that it feels easy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I like two things. I like two things particularly. One of them is the fun thing, builds trust. And we were talking about 5 thresholds before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it builds trust. And then you're leading into testimony, which is has credibility. It can't be debunked because it's your testimony. And that's what you're sharing. You're sharing something specifically relevant that Jesus has done for you. And like you were saying a minute ago, you know, if something works for you, it might work for somebody else. So I like those two aspects of it a lot.
That's great.
I think something that is worth bringing up is, especially on Twitter, given that that's a very, a wide platform. Anyone can see what you tweet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're sharing a testimony, you have a lot more people that have the ability to question the credibility of what you're saying. And, not even about God, but just the things that happen in your life. And I guess they'll question your interpretation of it. And
Yeah.
that can be very frustrating and disheartening.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I think,
I saw it a lot, especially uh, after George Floyd got killed, and people just opinions left and right, trying to interpret what happened.
yeah. Well, and social media can be pretty divisive. And so one of the things that we suggest with this is, instead of putting your testimony on like as a tweet or as your status,
Mhm.
you make the invitation your status or your tweet, and you're inviting people to come and dance K-pop and to have an honest conversation about how you're doing or how you're finding hope in the midst of a season of dread. So you're not, it's leans itself towards the spiritual, but anyone can answer that question.
Mhm.
And part of what's happening is they're choosing into your event. And when they're there, it's easier for people to be open and to be more charitable with each other's stories, because you're going to be hearing other people's stories. They're going to be hearing your story. And so you become one offering of the whole group. And so it makes it feel a little bit more mutual, and they don't have to try and assess whether your story is what they think is true or not. You're all just having a conversation about how you're dealing with COVID. And so it changes the dynamic a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll tell you one last story of someone from your region. So Bellama and Dree are students at Florida Memorial University, and they decided that they wanted to host an Ignite of their own. And so they got their whole chapter involved, and they hosted an open mic night on Zoom, which to me sounds crazy, but they pulled it off and it was wonderful. So they invited as far and wide as they could. They grabbed people, they helped recruit and get them ready to present their talents. And they had a magnificent talent show where people were not only excited to present their own, but to hear from one another. And then Bellama and Dree were able to pivot and say, now let's get real. Let's have an honest conversation about how we're doing in the midst of all this racial unrest. And because people had already bonded over their talents, they shared openly and vulnerably, sometimes sharing about trauma that they had experienced themselves in the last few weeks leading up to the event. And it has profoundly shaped the chapter, helping them to become more open and vulnerable, and inviting their nominal Christian friends or their non-Christian friends to join them, not only in fun, but in real conversations and in their Bible studies. And so we're going to pray for them later, because they're actually going to do the event I'm about to show you tomorrow. So I can't think of a better way to do this than just to read the event. So bear with me, but that's what I'm going to do. So it's called A Very COVID Christmas. So most years we have Christmas parties at the end of the year, but obviously this year it's going to be a little bit different. Most of us are online, and there's a lot that's been disappointing about 2020. And so here's an example of an invitation, Ryan. So this is how you would tell someone, invite someone without making them jump down your throat, but also letting them know what you're going to be talking about. So it says, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for 2020 to be over. Come take a break from the stresses of COVID, school, and everything. Join me for some holiday cheer. InterVarsity is hosting a Christmas party called A Very COVID Christmas. Join in for some online fun, an honest conversation about how you're finding hope in this season, and a short Christmas faith encouragement. So then everybody knows who's hosting, everybody knows exactly what to expect. And so if they're joining, they're already saying yes to the content, at least in terms of hearing it and participating. All right, and so we're going to skip the rest of this. This top sheet is just explaining what we've already talked about. And this is the example. So we just had the invitation. And when everyone comes and jumps on the Zoom call, the very first thing they're going to do is rename themselves with their name plus their most disappointing Christmas gift. And then we're going to quickly generate a poll and everyone's going to vote. And the person who has the worst Christmas gift is going to get a do-over. So they can either get DoorDash right then and there, like their favorite holiday drink, or they can be mailed a makeup Christmas gift that the chapter has decided on. So that's the icebreaker. And then once everyone is joined, you move into the fun. And the fun is a scavenger hunt, an online scavenger hunt. And I'll show you that in a second. But this is how you would transition. So there are 3 parts to our party today: fun, honesty, and a Christmas faith encouragement. So reminding everyone about what they're going to expect. First, we're going to have a contest. You'll all be put into teams of 4 to 5 people, and you're competing for bragging rights and the fantastic prize of a DoorDash drink from me. You have 30 minutes to do as many missions as possible and rack up the most points. The more creative you are, the more points you can earn. So then you split everyone up, and at the bottom, everybody gets a copy of this. It has about 25 missions, all that you can do online together, or some where people can run out to a parking lot and try and find like 2 green cars next to one another, something like that for different points. And people are posting these on Instagram, they're tagging your chapter account. It's great fun. If you are a part of the, what's it called, Goose Chase, that was happened a few months ago, that's exactly what this is, only without the app. So you have 30 minutes to try and rack up as many points as possible. And then we come back from the fun and we transition to the main event, our honest conversation. So that was so much fun. Now we're switching gears to the second part. Let's get real about 2020. For many of us, this has been the worst year of our lives, with one disappointment or nightmare after another. What's your biggest disappointment of 2020, and how did you cope? And so then you actually start by telling a story yourself. So to get it started, I asked if Ryan would kick us off and share. And so then Ryan would share his story. And then we'd send everyone out to breakout rooms now that they know what they're supposed to do. And in small breakout rooms, they'll be able to share honestly. We would make sure there's an InterVarsity student in each breakout room. Now finally, you gather everyone back together. They've all had 10 or 15 minutes to be honest with one another. And we end with one final testimony. And this is what we're going to pretend we're doing tonight. And we made it sort of a Mad Lib testimony. So this has been arguably the worst year of our lives. School sucks, Zoom sucks, masks suck. Think back to January. What were you looking forward to? I was feeling hopeful and looking forward to some trip. But when COVID disrupted the world, I felt blank. And when everything fell apart, I felt even more blank. We all have pain from this year, and we all have done the best we can to cope. But if you're like me, escaping doesn't help. It leaves us feeling empty, more empty than before. So we're gonna play 2020 bingo. Write in the chat, what are some of the things that you experienced? And so we just made a list of all the things that people have been experiencing in 2020. And we'd have a chance to share in the chat. And then I would come back and say, all right, so now we're going to do a second round. How have you coped? And we look at all these different ways that people cope. From saying, I'm on the verge of substance abuse. I'm avoidant and becoming numb or indifferent. I'm pushing people away. I watch that video so I can cry and feel something. I'm shopping on Amazon too much. I scroll my phone for hours and I can't remember anything I saw. I vent my frustration at people, or I'm over or under eating. I blame others for my problems. How are you, honestly, how are you coping? And then we come back and it's time for us to confess. I cope by, and say something, show one of the negative ways that we cope, but it didn't help me feel any better. And then this is me. It wasn't until I decided to invite God into my depression that I began to have some hope. Jesus gave me this, and then this is our little piece of hope from when we prayed earlier, and reminded me that something hopeful. I still feel depressed sometimes, and I sometimes turn to coping in ways that don't ultimately help me. But the best thing is, with Jesus, I don't have to stay in those places. When I invite Jesus into my disappointments, he fills me with himself and dramatically alters my perspective. Do you think that Jesus could do that for you too? So that's, from here up, that's where we're going to be working on. And then in this event, they're actually going to share the gospel. And so they're going to pivot with, can I share with you how? It gives me comfort to know God is no stranger to disappointment. Not only can God relate, but he actually wants to join me in my disappointment and create the means for me to cope. God has always wanted to fill us with his love and his spirit, but we people decided that we can meet our own physical, emotional, and spiritual needs without God. Where does that leave us when we put ourselves at the center of the story? Selfishness rampant everywhere we look. That's what's wrong with the world today. And God loves us too much to keep us in our isolation and disappointments and selfishness. Jesus joined us to bring healing and hope. In his suffering and death, he took our problems and brokenness to the grave with him. Then he came back to life to bring a new life to us. The Bible calls this act of inviting Jesus into our selfishness, repenting of our sins. And once we invited Jesus into the center of our story, we are a part of his community. We're given Jesus' love, healing, and power daily to deal with our disappointments and brokenness. Jesus gives us so much of his love, healing, and power. It overflows. And from that abundance, we love both our neighbors and our enemies. What would it take for you to follow Jesus or trust Jesus with your life? Then we just give everyone a moment to respond. We have a simple survey where people can respond to the gospel and share a little bit about the event. And then a quick ending, thanking everyone for coming and inviting people to come and join us in the new semester. And so that, in a nutshell, is an Ignite event with fun and honesty and an invitation to do some more. All right, now I'll stop share and get some thoughts. What's helpful about seeing an example all written out? What do you think about this event now that you've seen it?
That's really powerful.
Would you be excited about being a part of something like that, Ryan?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What makes you excited?
It kind of reminds me, it's going to sound a little strange, but bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of, so it kind of akin to the things that I would do with my my children's church,
Mm-hmm.
or just youth groups throughout the ages. And so like tapping back into that child, funness, which is something that I feel like I've lost, and I'm trying to maintain. Well, I haven't lost it. I'm trying to maintain it, I guess. But to to be invited to go there for a little bit,
Yeah,
for the purpose of digging into God's truth and loving on each other.
that's great. That's awesome. How about you, Amanda or Jeremiah? Is there something that you really like about this, or a question you have?
I think it's good. I feel like it was kind of similar to we had a Christmas party, um, and one time we did have like games and then a conversation with one of the pictures the university has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing, is sort of translating good ministry from before COVID and translating it online. So that's awesome. I'm glad it reminds you of something you've done before. That's fantastic. What about you, Jeremiah? Any final thoughts or words?
I think it's simply just making Jesus not sound exciting, but like bringing Jesus to you in a brand new way.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And I think that's the power of stories when we're telling a story that's happening to us right now, it makes Jesus so relevant. When I tell you a story about how Jesus met me 5 years ago, it might sound powerful and it might be all nice and tied up with a nice, neat bow, but it doesn't have the staying power. It doesn't really move our hearts to want to join in quite as much as when I can be raw about how God is meeting me in the midst of my loneliness right now and reminding me that even though I'm in a new city, and even though I don't know anyone and I can't go to church or do any of the things I normally would do to have community, that God's my community and He's going to sustain me in this season and He's going to give me contacts afterwards. Right? That's way more powerful than telling you about something that happened 5 years ago. So let's do it. I'm going to drop a Google Doc and then I'm going to drop the Mad Libs and you can choose. You can fill out the Mad Libs and just put in the emotion and the thing. Or if you want, you can write your own version, just a short, quick testimony like Destiny did. And the most important thing is identifying where do you feel broken and how is Jesus meeting you in the midst of your brokenness. So you get to choose. And almost there. I always forget to change the settings on the Google Doc before I get here. Okay. So you can jump into the Google Doc and copy and paste if you want into your row.